So for some time we've been doing some thinking around our strategic plan. You've kind of seen that. It's based on student prep, teacher support, and being an efficient and effective system. So we've kind of taken the vision and mission within that, and we've been doing a lot of work around the student prep piece in particular. And really the action step around that is lined out was to look at a 5-year adult and student learning model, focused on the student driving and learning and having an emphasis on continuous improvement. So the plan that we put in place really focuses on 3 things. And you'll hear me say this over and over and over again. So those 3 things are going to be student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation. Those are the things that you're going to see over and over again. So as we think about looking at continuous improvement, we kind of start with what are the core values of student achievement. And you've got, a number of things there, but we pay kind of particular attention to agility. We're paying particular attention to the innovation piece, really take a hard look at the systems piece, a focus on the future, and management by fact, and results in creating value. That's kind of really the core values that we kind of focus on within the plan. And then the plan is also kind of structured around the 7 categories within the continuous improvement model. When we've talked about really having spent some time this year building that category 4, that measurement, analysis, and knowledge management piece. That was an area where we were really weak. We've been working on enhancing that, and that really helps us support the other pieces. So we've taken that piece, we've taken the vision, the mission, we've taken really the 3 categories of student achievement or student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation, and we drew a whole lot on the whiteboard in my conference room and erased and drew arrows here and there and asked questions and played around and came to what you're going to see kind of tonight. And it really kind of is a question of what do we want school to look like? Do we want heads down in desks and rows? Do we want kids sitting there with their books open with heads in their hands, bored to death, or do we want engaged kids? So that's why the student engagement piece is so important. So again, key areas over and over again, student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation. But even with that, we did kind of draw some boundaries around ourselves a little bit, put some parameters around us. And those are that we had to work within the strategic plan, that staff development around student engagement and continuous improvement would be a key piece, that we would be innovative within the plan, that within the plan we would try to expand early childhood opportunities, just had that conversation, but with all of that, we would try to stay within our existing footprint, at least in the short term. So with that, we're going to take a look at the innovative piece mostly and what we want to do relative to innovation, and then we're going to kind of later on we're going to look at kind of the plan overall and how the pieces of the plan are integrated into one. So in terms of innovation, we want to open an innovative elementary school based around personalized learning, problem-based learning, competency and proficiency-based, and being a nearly one-to-one environment. We want to explore options for middle school and high school, things like IB, magnets, STEAM-based schools, early college options. We'll look at a couple of other options around that. And we want to look at a longer school year for any of our underperforming schools. So that's kind of where we want to go. So we're going to talk about the innovative elementary school and options for middle and high school in a little bit more detail. But before we do that, as we talk about what an innovative elementary school is, it's important to know a little bit about what do we mean by personalized learning and what do we mean by problem-based learning. So in terms of personalized learning, we're looking at individual student needs. We're talking about kids being able to move along at their own pace. We're talking about a kid who may be age-wise a first grader, but it's okay that you're doing fourth grade math and that we can support that. In terms of problem-based learning, the best example is what we saw when we showed Most Likely to Succeed last month, and that kids solve a real-world problem, and along that journey of solving that problem, they learn content and domain and strategies along the way. So a lot of people, though, will interchange project-based learning with problem-based learning. They are not the exact same thing, but they are pretty close. So you'll kind of see those used interchangeably, and they're pretty close together. So how do we get to this new elementary school of innovation? How do we get to expanded early childhood opportunities? Well, this is how. We want to take the Alt Academy and embed it into the high schools, starting in 17-18. We then want to move Stretch out of Witzel, which will allow us to move Scope into Witzel and allow us to use St. John's as the school choice of innovation. All of this happening in 17-18. We're planning on expanded summer school this summer and potentially more in 2017, which will help us to drive revenue, to help us to fund some of these things. We're looking at the longer school year, possibly in 17-18. Probably the earliest change to middle schools and high schools being 17-18. And with making those moves and taking a few kids out of buildings with the school choice of innovation, we'll open up some space in existing elementaries, and with some minor redistricting that we really already need to do because of space issues at building, that should allow us to gain space for early childhood, staying in our existing footprint. But as we look further to the future, then look at potential a facility issue in the future that would include perhaps early childhood, another facility. So talking more specifically about this school choice of innovation, we really don't have a name for it. You know, the question is why St. John? And why not just make Forder into this, or Hageman, or, you know, just pick a building? Well, it's really about creating culture and community that is very different. So if we moved a Point or an Oakville Elementary to this, then we would have an attendance zone. We would almost be forcing families into this sort of model, and we would have to blow up the existing culture within those schools to make them into something different. So we believe it easier and more seamless to create new culture, new community in a new location without an attendance zone that families come to by choice. So we would select the students via an application and lottery process, opening in 17-18 as a K-4 with between 220 and 250 kids, and then growing it the next year into a K-5 with up to 300. 300 would pretty much be where we would be at capacity. So that's kind of what the school choice of innovation would look like. Middle school and high school possibilities that we've kind of started the conversations around, but we would start exploring a little more detail a little bit later, would be kind of magnet middle schools, whether that be STEM or a visual and performing arts, or, you know, could we do IB in middle school, which we could also look at IB in elementaries. How do we embed, if we're going to do problem-based learning in elementary, then how are we going to grow that into middle school and high school? So having those kinds of programs embedded in the buildings, looking at potentially consolidating programs within the high school. So for example, we offer biomedical in both buildings. Instead of doing that and kind of having kind of okay programs in both buildings, concentrating that to one location and offering a really stellar biomedical program in one facility while maybe doing engineering design in another facility, in one of the other high schools. Doing it that way. Also looking at and exploring the idea of high school academies, which is kind of really a concept of school within a school, as well as looking at early college opportunities for high school kids. This past spring, I had the opportunity to be part of a group of superintendents. There was about 10 of us from across the country, along with about a dozen community college presidents from across the country, talking about early college options and what's happening around the U.S. We saw a particularly good model happening in the Houston area, where each community college in that kind of area has partnered with at least one high school, sometimes more, to look at opportunities within the high school, within the school day, and their kids are graduating high school with associate's degree. So exploring early college type opportunities to see where we could be in that regard. So really kind of how do we get there is really around building our human capacity and building human capital to get there. So part of that we're starting this month in terms of our Instructional Innovation Academy that we're launching. We've got roughly 44 of our teachers in that, and then we have also opened up slots for other districts. They pay to help offset our costs, so we're kind of selling slots in those pieces and offering staff development to other districts. That's a 3-year academy. Then in August, we'll launch an Innovation Incubator staff development series. But moving along with this and the school choice of innovation, we'll need to select a principal relatively quickly, so then that person can pull together an implementation team, start doing school visits, and begin to build the framework and the logistics moving forward and building the details. And probably looking at staff selection late this spring in terms of teachers to begin to more develop those people who will be in the building, because we're going to be asking them to teach in a different way and how we would develop them. So obviously this is going to cost money. So we know that by moving stretch, we'll have a slight increase in transportation costs, but we know by embedding ALT into the high schools, we'll have some costs going down. We know that we'll have additional revenue by expanding summer school. We know that we've got to enhance the technology piece at St. John, not only in the wireless capacity of the building, but then we would need technology for the kids. Startup in terms of do we need to renovate some spaces? What kind of supplies are we going to need? The staffing, we believe through some other pieces that we're working on, that overall we don't see our overall employee count growing by much at all. We believe we can move some folks around in that regard. We know that we'll have to have a playground at St. John if it's going to be an elementary school. Possibly some furniture issues, the cost of moving, and the cost of the school visits. Obviously, we could add other things on there in terms of lunch and those kinds of things. We do think the plan has a number of strengths. We believe through the plan we'll be able to start college and career readiness earlier. The expansion of early childhood opportunities will help with kindergarten readiness. We'll have a place to innovate and see what's working and then scale that across other buildings and across the district. We think that a program of choice and innovation will attract and retain families that people will want. We think people will want to come here for it, and because of that, we think that will position us as an innovative leader in the region. Nobody in the region is doing anything like this. We see this in Kansas City, but we don't see this in the St. Louis region. Also moves us away from this one-size-fits-most kind of education model, and we stay aligned with those key elements of student engagement, of continuous improvement, and innovation. There are some concerns. We know that some of them are minor, such as no elevator at St. John. The long-term viability of Witzel is a concern in terms of, how much longer is the building workable? 15 years ago, that same question was being asked. We band-aided it along. What the lottery process will look like to ensure that this new school is a representative sample of the district and is not just a cookie cutter, but it really is a diverse building that looks like the district as a whole. And boundary changes are always fun. But really, we need to do that anyway based on some crowding in some places. But we also want to be clear about what it is not. So we're not talking about eliminating stretch. We're talking about moving it. And the location that we've been talking about actually may allow for more contact time. We want to be clear that we're not eliminating scope. We're just moving it. We're not forcing the elementaries to change their culture and climate from what they currently are. They all have their own culture and climate. They're all different. We're looking at creating culture new somewhere else. We're not blowing up what folks might consider traditional schooling. We're still going to have those opportunities for kids. We're just going to have some other opportunities for kids who may not be successful in a traditional setting, but may find this more engaging and more exciting and more relevant to what they're interested in. And we're not looking at drawing attendance boundaries for St. John. It would truly be a school of choice. You would have to want to go there. So from a process standpoint, we're looking for your feedback tonight. We went through this with administrators earlier today, got their feedback, got their questions. So as we've done in another instance, really what we're going to ask is, do we stop thinking about this now, or do we continue to move forward with planning? If we move forward, we need to look at selecting a principal soon, and for them to pull together that implementation team, starting those school visits with that implementation team, beginning to build capacity within the staff that's going to go in there, that implementation team really working that logistical work to begin to get it more specific and what it's going to look like. And then we've already got building visits planned pretty much over the next, well, between now and the end of March, I think, or the first part of March, to be in the buildings to explain kind of what this is. So really, we've got a set of kind of loose specs right now. We've kind of got this loose idea of what we want the school to be like, and we would, with this implementation team, begin to tighten that down to a point where if you say move forward, at about this time next year, we would have to make a final decision of yes, we're going to do it, or no, we're not. So that would give us a year to do a lot of capacity building and to really tighten it down, because about this time next year is when we would need to have that lottery process ready to go to launch so that we can go kind of get all the way through that. But this is really all just part of a larger plan, right? It's just one piece of a larger plan. So here's where the handout comes, because that's hard to see,
because
right?
the font is
Drum
so
roll,
small
Yeah.
for those of us who are seeing impaired.
All right, so hopefully you can read that it says draft. So this pulls together kind of different systems into an integrated system. So at the top, we have curriculum. So we've got this year and the next 5 years out to see where we're headed. So this is our curriculum adoption schedule. We've got a 10-year schedule, so you're seeing 6 years of it. So for this year, we're doing curriculum revision in those 3 areas, K through 5 ELA, middle school math, and the science piece. So then for 16-17, we're purchasing materials to support what we revised in 15-16, right? So now you know, okay, when are we buying new middle school science books? 18-19 school year. That's when they're coming, right? We're doing revision in 17-18. We purchase the materials for the 18-19 school year. We also then have this piece, rather large piece, around staff development, which is a critical portion of Prop R. So within that, we are splitting the elementaries into 3 cohorts. So those would be E1, E2, and E3. So we have them on a march of Kagan training followed by continuous classroom improvement training. So cohort 1 has already had the Kagan training, so they start with continuous improvement training next. The second cohort is trailing behind them, and the third cohort is trailing behind that. So you can see just kind of how all that tiers. So that training looks like some training in the summer just as school is about to begin, and then coaching throughout the school year. And we do that over 3 years to move beyond just an introduction into what CCI is, but moving to implement it in classrooms with fidelity and moving to institutionalization. If we have to go beyond the 4 years, we can continue to do that because we're really driving around student engagement, continuous improvement, and innovation. We also have staff development lined out for the middle school and the high school. I talked about the Instructional Innovation Academy and the incubator that are starting. Also, just on a regular basis, we've got ongoing PD around the curriculum that we've adopted. And we're going to move to sending small teams of folks to the Model Schools Conference so that we can see and go learn from some of the best schools in the country and what's going on in those and what innovations are happening there, as well as a big technology conference to know, what's going on in terms of instructional technology and leading. So sending teams of folks to those on a regular basis so that we can really become know what's on the leading edge and bring those innovations back and implement those here in Melville. On the finance piece, we had Prop R pass. We may put something on the ballot. So that Prop R revenue would start next year. The 4-cent revenue would start, but that would just fund the HVAC and roof. Next year we'll have the start of a rolling 3-year budget plan that we'll have together. And then from Prop R, we've got the added positions, the supply budget adds, the clubs, customer focused funds, and the devices for high school kids. Then the year after, as we would open an innovative school, we would look at what those expenses are as we add that in. Then in terms of capital, we've kind of got the annual basis there and what that looks like in terms of year 1, year 2, year 3 of those plans. Some of that information around roofs and HVAC was included in under the 4-cent piece. So you can see what that is. So we frame and pigeonhole those numbers in there. The other thing that we'll start working on later this month is something a little bit more on a large scale capital issue, as we'll begin to work with our parent organizations to do needs assessments by building through the spring, begin to prioritize next year with a possible facility issue in 17-18, which is when we could consider adding an early childhood facility at that point, which still wouldn't be, even if you did it there, you're looking at an opening maybe of 19 at the earliest, potentially. So the next piece going down is innovation and kind of what we've talked about with the innovative school and what we need to do there, as well as some possibilities of revamping and doing some things at the high school and middle school. I do want to call your attention to a couple of things, or one thing in particular in the 16-17 column, and that is next school year, opportunity for our high school kids to participate in the CAPS program will begin. That's a nationwide network. Locally, Afton runs the local CAPS program. So that affords kids the opportunity to do more job-specific kind of training and learning, and includes an internship component with that. So it's kind of really not only problem-based learning, but problem-based learning with an internship piece mixed in. And we've got the expanded summer school piece in there, and then we're looking to expand Project Lead the Way into middle school and then into the elementaries eventually as we move forward. And then we've just got a communications piece in there in terms of we had the new app this year that just we informed people about this week, and then we have to redo our website for next year based on provider. So those are kind of how we've got this whole thing integrated across systems. So this innovation piece and the plan is supported by the staff development piece. The calendar helps support all of that piece. But, and as we kind of grow some other things, those will be embedded in this integrated system too. But we know that's not all. We know we've got other things that we need to do and some things that we'll be able to do as we work through this. We know that we need to take a look at our department chair responsibilities and what they are and how we leverage those folks. So we're looking at revamping what the department chair responsibilities are. Then we're looking at capacity building along those folks, and then leveraging their leadership within their department and really leveraging our folks to move us forward. But we've got to build their capacity to do that. We know we've got some large class sizes in elementary school across the district, so there is a need for elementary teachers to do where we would like to be. We know in terms of technology, we would need some elementary computer teachers. We would like to have that. We know that there's a need for subject area coordinators and specialists. It's kind of interesting. We have a director of fine arts, but we don't have a director of math or comm arts, right? So those pieces are things that we would need. And then in terms of just straight up numbers relative to MSIP standards, and you saw a lot of this in the staffing and enrollment report that had been emailed a while back, is that to reach minimum state standards for librarians, we need another 1.6 librarians. And even with those, that we still have less than one per building, so our libraries aren't open all the time. We talked about that for state standards, we are below those minimum standards relative to principals and assistant superintendents. We've got a need for personnel in the business department, especially relative to the amount of overtime that gets worked in the business department, and whether we could take that overtime and just hire a full-time person to reduce the load on our folks. Payroll is complicated. We do it every other month, so we do it nonstop. And then ongoing process and system development that we've got to do. Some of that we've been working on. We've been looking at onboarding processes. We've been looking at offboarding processes, all of those things and what we need to do. So to kind of go back to an overview of what the plan is, which is on the back side of what you have there too, is we're not really looking to do anything next year but capacity build and get people ready and trained up and ready to go for some significant changes in 17, 18. For some of those people, it's just going to be moving where they are. They're going to do the same things that they're doing now. They're just going to do it in a different location. The big thing is the opening of the school choice of innovation and some minor redistricting that should let us expand early childhood within our existing facilities. And then looking beyond that, possible changes to the middle school and high school in terms of programming. Because if we start this school choice of innovation and kids go kindergarten through 5th grade in a project-based learning environment, we've got to have something ready when they hit middle school and high school. So to some extent, we're going to grow that up. So that's not why we're not immediately looking at the middle school and high school piece right now. But it's going to be right behind the other one. So if we were getting ready to launch a space shuttle or something like that, we would ask for a go, no-go before we get going, as we move forward. So as I kind of said, what we have is something, we have a plan. It is loose, right? So I can't tell you what color the playground equipment's going to be. I can't tell you what the furniture's going to be. Can't tell you what the schedule's going to be. But if you let us move forward, we're going to determine who that principal is really quickly, put together an implementation team, and have them begin to narrow all of that down, provide periodic reports to the board between now and about this time next year. And at this time next year, we'll need you to make the final decision of, are we doing this, are we not doing it?